Okay, let's unpack this. Some topics just, they immediately grab our attention, don't they?
They really do.
And few are as impactful, I think, or as globally resonant as major air incidents.
Hmm.
The sheer thought of a plane crash, the suddenness, the scale of it, it just immediately rivets us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So today, we're taking a deep dive into a stack of recent sources. They detail significant plane crashes from late last year, early this year, right up to June 2025.
Right.
Our goal for this deep dive, it's really to pull out the most vital insights from these sources, help you understand not just what happened, but, why it matters, what it tells us about the ever-evolving world of aviation.
Exactly.
So prepare for those aha moments, maybe, because we're trying to go beyond the headlines here, give you a thorough but still time-respecting look at these critical events.
It's true. And what truly stands out here, I think, is the sheer diversity of these incidents.
Yeah.
We're looking at everything from, mid-air collisions in highly controlled airspace
Unbelievable.
to crashes potentially caused by engineering faults, maybe, and even severe environmental factors impacting remote operations.
Right.
We'll be connecting the dots, sort of, helping you see the broader picture of aviation safety, the human factors that often play a role,
That's key.
and the incredibly rigorous investigative processes that, well, they always follow these tragedies.
Yeah.
We'll explore the immediate impacts, definitely, but also the deeper human stories behind the statistics
Important.
and the initial findings that start to shape our understanding, encouraging that critical thinking about the complex interconnected systems involved in air travel, everything from aircraft design to maintenance protocols to, well, air traffic control.
Okay, so where do we start? I guess we have to begin with the most recent and tragically the deadliest incident on our list. Air India Flight AI-171.
Hmm.
This was a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner, tail number VTANB. It was embarking on what should have been, a totally routine journey, Ahmedabad to London Gatwick, June 12th, 2025.
Right. And the Dreamliner itself, it's such a modern aircraft.
State of the art, really, known for long-haul passenger comfort.
Exactly. Which makes what happened next all the more shocking.
Yeah.
One notable aspect of this incident, even in those very early reports, is just how fast things escalated. From routine departure to, well, catastrophe.
How fast are we talking?
Our sources say shortly after takeoff, 13.39 Indian Standard Time, the pilots issued a mayday.
Wow. Okay. The big one.
The big one, yeah. An urgent distress call signaling a severe, immediate threat to the aircraft or, lives on board.
And so soon after takeoff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The fact that this call came so quickly after becoming airborne, maybe mere minutes after leaving the runway, it really points to a sudden catastrophic failure.
Giving the crew almost no time.
Very little time to react or, implement any recovery procedures.
Yeah.
The urgency of a mayday from a relatively new, sophisticated aircraft like the Dreamliner, it immediately signals something profound, something unexpected, a system failure maybe.
Forcing investigators to look for something really rare or sudden. And the physical impact. It wasn't just the plane. It hit the ground, right, in a populated area.
That's the other layer of tragedy here.
Yep.
Yeah. The plane crashed into a hostel near BJ Medical College.
A hostel.
Yeah, bursting into flame. This wasn't some remote field. It was an urban crash site.
Which just amplifies everything.
Immediately amplifies the scale of impact, affecting not just those on board, but the community on the ground.
God, can you imagine the response? Emergency services dealing with burning buildings, debris.
The complexity. Getting access, the sheer number of victims, both from the aircraft and on the ground.
A true urban catastrophe scenario.
Absolutely. The location adds that significant layer of complexity to rescue, recovery, the initial investigation, proximity to homes, potential for wider damage from debris, fire.
And the human cost. Let's talk about the numbers because they are just stark.
They're devastating.
260 confirmed dead. That's the figure we have.
Yes. 240 passengers and crew from the flight, plus 19 people on the ground.
19 people just going about their day. That's nearly the entire capacity of a Dreamliner, plus those innocent bystanders. It's just heartbreaking.
It is. And the scale of that loss, you see it underscored in the recovery and identification efforts detailed in the sources.
What do they say about that?
Well, we learned that 256 bodies have been returned to families.
Okay.
And 259 of the 260 victims have been identified.
That's incredible work, but just highlights the sheer difficulty.
It highlights the painstaking, often lengthy, and emotionally taxing work involved in providing closure.
You'd have forensic teams from multiple countries, I imagine.
Absolutely. Using dental records, DNA analysis, personal effects. It's a process that can take weeks, sometimes months, after a mass casualty event like this.
A testament to the dedication of those people.
It really is. Recognizing that profound human need for identification, for dignified return of remains.
And the list of victims, it really shows you how global air travel is now.
Doesn't it just?
180 Indians, 49 British, others from Portugal, Canada.
Right. A single incident impacts multiple nations. This global web of grief affecting families, communities across continents.
And even prominent figures like the former Gujarat Chief Minister Vijay Rupani reported among the deceased.
Yeah, which underscores that broad societal ripple effect, that sense that, no one is immune from something like this.
The sources also mention one survivor.
Yes.
Yes.
Which is almost unbelievable, isn't it?
It's such a stark contrast to the overwhelming number of fatalities, makes the scale almost more poignant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Emphasizes the incredibly rare chance of survival in such a catastrophic event. That lone survivor story that we don't have details, it makes you wonder.
How? Amidst all that.
Exactly. Now, connecting this to the bigger picture, the immediate focus after any crash this big is, well, the inquiry.
Right.
In this case, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, the DGCA, that's India's regulatory body,
Okay.
along with Air India, they launched a joint inquiry.
And what are they looking at initially?
What's particularly concerning and what immediately grabs attention are these preliminary reports suggesting a possible engineering fault,
Okay.
and specifically following a very recent refurbishment of the aircraft.
Oh, wow. So not just a random part failing, but potentially linked to recent maintenance.
Potentially. It hints at a possible systemic vulnerability in the maintenance, repair, and overhaul process, the MRO process.
Which is critical for safety.
A critical pillar of aviation safety.
Yeah.
It's not just about the part failing, but why it failed, especially after a major overhaul.
So if that is the case, I mean, how does that bring the whole process into question? What specifically is under scrutiny?
That's the crucial question, isn't it? If an engineering fault is suspected after refurbishment, it immediately puts maintenance protocols, quality control,
Everything.
under sharp scrutiny.
Yeah.
It's not just the fault itself, but how it might have developed or crucially gone undetected during that overhaul.
Right.
This could involve issues with, say, the quality of replacement parts, the rigor of inspections.
By the technician.
Yeah, the training, the certification of the maintenance personnel, even the certification process for the repairs themselves.
Especially with complex materials on modern planes like the Dreamliner.
Exactly. Composites.
Mm.
Their inspection and repair methods are incredibly complex. They demand very high precision, strict adherence to manufacturer guidelines.
So investigators are looking at the whole life cycle.
The entire life cycle of that aircraft, its components, from factory original parts to every maintenance action, particularly how a fault could emerge or persist after a major service.
And the implications could be huge, wider than just this one plane.
Far wider. It could impact similar models, maintenance procedures across the industry, forcing a reevaluation of best practices.
It also brings in human factors in maintenance, right? Fatigue, training gaps.
Absolutely. Pressure to get the job done quickly.
Yeah.
All those things can subtly undermine even the best protocols.
And the response from regulators, the industry,
Yeah.
it seems like they're taking this very broad concern seriously.
They have to. The source mentions extensive ongoing efforts. Cleanup, victim ID, and, crucially, triggered regulatory audits.
Who's involved in those?
The DGCA, a parliament panel, even Boeing, the manufacturer, are all being summoned,
Boeing involved directly.
which signifies a broad industry and governmental response. When a major manufacturer like Boeing is called in, it signals a potential systemic issue,
Something that could affect their whole fleet or design.
potentially, demanding answers not just about this incident, but about the fundamental safety of their widely used aircraft. These audits, they're designed to find systemic weaknesses, not just isolated errors.
Looking at manufacturing, design, maintenance across the board.
Exactly, and oversight mechanisms,
Yeah.
all to prevent future occurrences on a wider scale. It shows the layers of accountability in aviation. One incident can lead to a worldwide reevaluation.
Okay, let's shift gears. Moving to an incident that really sent shockwaves across the U.S., a mid-air collision over Washington, D.C., January 29th, 2025.
Yeah, that one was chilling.
It involved an American Airlines CRJ 700, that's a regional jet, Flight 5342,
Right.
and a U.S. Army Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter.
Just the idea.
Yeah.
Two aircraft colliding in that kind of airspace.
So controlled, so sensitive. How does that even happen?
It's truly alarming. Mid-air collisions are incredibly rare, almost impossible in modern controlled airspace because of sophisticated ATC systems, onboard collision avoidance.
DGCA and all that.
Right. But this one occurred at a remarkably low altitude, just 300 feet.
300 feet, while approaching Reagan National.
Exactly. The sheer proximity to a major capital city's airspace just amplifies the concern. It raises immediate fundamental questions about air traffic control procedures.
Like task management.
For both civilian and military aircraft. And the coordination protocols between those two distinct operations in such a sensitive, congested environment.
It challenges basic assumptions about safety there.
It really does. Causes an immediate deep dive into every single layer of defense.
And the outcome, total loss of life.
Yes. All 67 aboard the jet, all 3 on the helicopter. 70 fatalities total.
The source notes it grimly as the deadliest U.S. air disaster since 2001.
Underscoring its historical significance, unfortunately. Brings back memories of other major tragedies.
70 lives.
Just gone. And the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, their preliminary report points to dangerously narrow vertical separation.
Meaning they were way too close.
Way too close. Hundreds of feet, maybe, instead of the mandated thousands. That's a critical safety parameter in ATC. A fundamental breakdown in maintaining safe distances.
And it also calls out the FAA.
It directly calls into question the FAA's oversight of near-miss alerts.
So the big question is, were there warnings that were missed? Did systems fail to flag the danger?
Exactly. Could it impact the broader system? ATC has multiple layers of redundancy, ground radar, TCAS onboard.
Right.
A failure here suggests a significant systemic issue. TCS should give pilots alerts, even tell them how to maneuver evasively.
So the NTSB looking at FAA oversight means they're digging into whether those warnings worked, whether controllers were properly trained, supported.
Precisely. Was it human factors? Workload. And it opens up questions about how civilian and military airspace are managed together, especially in busy areas.
Okay, another incident with a really profound ground impact. Philadelphia, January 31st, 2025, MedJet's Flight 056.
Right, the Learjet 55.
An air ambulance flight. That adds a different dimension, doesn't it? You think of a patient on board, maybe a critical situation.
That's a key point. The nature of the flight itself, an air ambulance, often operating under urgency, critical patient transport.
A unique mission profile.
Yeah, sometimes needing to operate quickly in varied conditions. It adds a layer of inherent pressure, different from a scheduled commercial flight.
And it crashed shortly after takeoff.
Yes, in the Castor Gardens area of Philadelphia, which again speaks to the dangers of that immediate post-departure phase.
Especially over a city.
Absolutely. Takeoff is high risk. Maximum power, lift, precise control are critical. Any failure then, mechanical or pilot error, especially over a city, immediate devastating consequences. Low, slow, limited options.
And again, the tragedy wasn't just contained to the aircraft.
No, it wasn't. All 6 on board perished.
Okay.
But the crash also killed 2 civilians on the ground and injured 23 others.
23 injured on the ground.
Yeah. The source says it struck multiple buildings, caused fires, explosions, a true urban catastrophe impacting the whole neighborhood.
So this raises that question again about the secondary impact in populated areas.
It does. The NTSB investigation won't just look at the aircraft failure, mechanical, pilot incapacitation, weather, whatever it was,
Right.
but also the patterns of impact, the wider community risk. It underscores how multifaceted these investigations are. They go beyond the plane itself.
Looking at structural damage, fires from fuel.
The emergency response in a civilian setting, it forces a review of urban planning near airports, flight paths.
Emergency preparedness.
Yeah.
Exactly. For large-scale incidents with hazardous materials like jet fuel, it's a stark reminder that the consequences ripple through a community. Zoning, evacuation procedures, how first responders are equipped and trained.
And the human element is those unsuspecting lives on the ground.
Impacted by something totally beyond their control.
Okay, let's move from cities to the sea. Aerolínea lanza Flight 018.
Right, Honduras.
March 17th, 2025. A BA Jetstream 32. Crashed into the sea shortly after takeoff from Roatan, heading to La Ceiba.
Yeah, the challenges of a sea crash are just incredibly different, especially right after takeoff.
Absolutely. Initial reports point towards likely engine failure.
Okay.
But sea crashes present unique Significantly greater challenges for recovery, for investigation, the marine environment itself.
How so?
While wreckage sinks fast, it can obscure critical evidence,
Yeah.
makes it much harder to pinpoint the exact sequence of events leading to the failure.
Needs specialized equipment.
Highly specialized ROVs, divers,
Hmm.
significant time, resources. Which smaller countries or airlines might struggle to mobilize quickly?
And currents.
Ocean currents can disperse debris over a huge area. Makes reconstructing the aircraft incredibly complex, unlike a land crash where it's mostly contained.
A vast search area, deep water, saltwater corrosion.
Exactly. All complicates gathering that forensic evidence, like the flight recorders, the black boxes, can really prolong the investigation.
And the human cost here,
Tragically, 13 of the 18 people on board were killed.
including a prominent Honduran singer, Aurelio Martinez.
Yes. But 5 people did survive.
A glimmer of hope, which is often rare in water impacts like that.
It is. But beyond the casualties, the aftermath for the airline itself was swift and severe.
What happened?
Operations were suspended following the crash.
Shut down completely.
Yes. Shows how one incident can profoundly impact an entire business, especially smaller regional carriers like Lunsa.
Raises questions about their safety protocols, the resilience.
Exactly. For smaller airlines on tighter margins, one catastrophe can be financially devastating, erodes public trust quickly, can lead to swift regulatory action, maybe even permanent shutdown, regardless of the final cause.
Puts immense pressure on their safety culture.
And financial viability. The suspension usually allows regulators to do a top-to-bottom audit. Maintenance, pilot training, safety management systems, making sure any broader issues are fixed before they can fly again, if they fly again.
Okay, next up, Alaska. The challenging conditions there.
Yes. Bering Air Flight 445.
February 6th, 2025. A Cessna 208B Grand Caravan EX crashed into Norton Sound after departing unallocated for Nome.
Right.
All 10 on board were killed. Alaska's environment, it just adds this unique layer of complexity, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And what's striking here is the preliminary NTSB report. It quickly pointed to 2 specific, very well-known aviation hazards.
Things we already know about.
Things frequently encountered in that environment. 1, the aircraft was overloaded.
Okay.
2, it had icing on the tail.
These aren't new issues in aviation.
Not at all. Fundamental principles taught to every pilot. Yet they remain persistent threats, particularly in demanding cold weather operations like Alaska.
Where the environment itself can severely impact performance and judgment.
Exactly. Overloading affects lift, stability, climb capability. Makes the plane sluggish, harder to control, needs more runway.
And tail icing.
That's particularly insidious. It disrupts airflow over the control surfaces, the horizontal stabilizer. Can lead to what's called a tailplane stall.
How's that different from a normal stall?
A wing stall usually makes the nose pitch down, which pilots can often recover from. A tailplane stall causes an abrupt, uncontrollable nose-down pitch. Extremely dangerous, often irrecoverable at low altitude.
Right where they were during takeoff.
Precisely. These are classic fundamental risks pilots are trained rigorously to avoid. But in challenging conditions, vigilance, strict adherence to procedures has to be absolute.
So what does this mean for safety in these remote, extreme environments? It really highlights basics, doesn't it? Meticulous pre-flight checks.
Accurate weight and balance calculations.
Strict adherence to operational limits for cargo passengers.
And diligent de-icing procedures. Absolutely critical.
Because in remote places like Alaska,
You often have less infrastructure, fewer places to divert to, rapidly changing, unpredictable weather.
so the pilot's decision-making becomes even more critical.
Their adherence to procedures, understanding human factors like pressure, fatigue, it's all paramount. Overloading is a clear violation. It can stem from economic pressures, demands, miscalculation.
And tail icing is hard to spot sometimes.
It can be very difficult to detect visually, especially if it forms unevenly or during flight. And its effects on stability can be sudden and severe.
So this incident underscores that even with known hazards, established protocols.
A lapse in judgment or procedure may be due to human factors. Complacency, external pressures can have catastrophic consequences, especially combined with that unforgiving environment.
A reminder that fundamentals remain critical no matter how advanced the tech.
It's not just technical failures. It often involves complex human decision-making under stress.
Okay, so beyond these major incidents we've detailed, The sources also give us a snapshot of some other notable events.
Right.
Reinforces how diverse these incidents are globally, not just one type of plane, one type of operation.
That's right. It paints a comprehensive picture of the challenges worldwide.
For instance,
Well, there was Jeju Air Flight 2216 in South Korea back on December 29, 2024. Experienced a belly landing.
gear failure or a bird strike, the source suggests.
Right. Points to mechanical failures or that unexpected environmental interference pilots have to respond to fast.
A bird strike seems minor, but it can cause real damage.
Significant damage to engines, critical flight surfaces, and gear failures, while rare, demand exceptional skill. A belly landing, while terrifying,
Means the pilot kept some control.
managed to land the aircraft under extraordinary circumstances, often results in injuries, but allows for survivable outcomes. Highlights the importance of emergency training, resilient aircraft design.
Then there's the Light Air Services Beechcraft 1900 in South Sudan, January 29th, 2025.
Yeah, that one was tragic. Crashed shortly after takeoff.
Killed 20 of 21 on board. Again, highlighting that critical, vulnerable takeoff phase.
Exactly, where a combination of factors, mechanical, environmental, can quickly lead to disaster.
And in regions with maybe less robust infrastructure or maintenance support.
Those risks can sometimes be exacerbated. Puts a greater emphasis on ground crews, local operational standards. Aviation safety isn't uniform globally.
International standards exist, but implementation varies.
It can. The Beechcraft 1900 is a workhorse, but in demanding environments like South Sudan, things like runway conditions, access to certified parts, fuel quality, maintenance experience,
All become critical human factors.
they can influence the safety margin during a high-risk phase like takeoff. The investigation there would look deeply into that operational environment.
And finally, a different category. A military incident.
Yes, the MiG-21 Indian Air Force trainer crash in India, April 2025.
Both pilots killed. Led to a court of inquiry.
Reminds us military aviation faces inherent risks too. Their incidents undergo equally rigorous, critical investigations, though often with less public detail, understandably.
The national security concerns.
Right. Military aircraft often operate faster, lower, and more dynamic, stressful scenarios. Different risks. The MiG-21, a Cold War design.
Known for being demanding to fly.
Yes. Incidents like this often prompt reviews of maintenance, pilot training for older platforms, structural integrity of aging fleets.
The court of inquiry looks for similar things. What happened? Why?
Similar principles, yes, but also addressing pilot training, equipment reliability, operational procedures within a combat or training context. Each of these incidents, civil, military, regional, major, they all feed into that collective global knowledge base, lessons learned across the spectrum.
Okay, let's try and unpack this then. Looking at all these incidents together, from the devastating Air India crash, those engineering questions, to the mid-air collision raising systemic oversight concerns, the challenges in Arctic oceanic environments, what are the common threads here beyond the awful tragedy itself? And what about the human element in keeping this complex system safe?
Well, what truly stands out, I think, despite how varied they all are, circumstances, aircraft types, locations, immediate causes.
Yeah.
A consistent pattern emerges. Every single incident, regardless of scale, triggers an immediate, often lengthy investigation by dedicated agencies.
Always.
The unwavering goal is always to understand not just what happened, but why, to prevent it happening again.
It's not about blame.
It's not primarily about blame. It's about learning, improving. They meticulously dissect every detail. Flight data, cockpit, voice recorders.
It's a black boxes.
Right, capturing operational parameters, pilot communications, forensic analysis of wreckage, witness accounts, complex simulations, all to painstakingly piece together the sequence, identify root causes.
Whether human error, mechanical failure, environment.
Or a combination. Or even systemic issues in regulation or maintenance. This systematic, often painstaking approach, even facing immense tragedy, it's fundamental to aviation's continuous safety improvement.
Shows how human factors, pilot decisions, maintenance diligence are woven into the tech.
Intricately woven into the technical reliability of these systems.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Someone who flies or just relies on a safe air system. It boils down to transparency, continuous improvement.
I think so. A relentless pursuit of safety. Always building on past lessons, fundamentally learning from human experience, even the tragic experiences.
Right.
Precisely. And this prompts an important realization, I think. While these incidents are tragic, deeply impactful, Each one contributes invaluable data, invaluable insights.
To a deeper understanding of safety.
Yes, from scrutinizing FAA oversight after that mid-air collision, to questioning maintenance after the Air India refurbishment, to addressing known issues like overloading and icing. Every single detail feeds back into making air travel even safer.
Lessons from one crash inform changes globally.
Exactly. Findings from Air India might inform Boeing's designs worldwide. Lessons from that Alaskan crash might refine pilot training in challenging environments everywhere.
It's a constant feedback loop.
A constant evolving process, learning from adversity to enhance the resilience, the reliability of the entire aviation ecosystem. Every failure point, every unexpected human factor is analyzed not to assign individual blame, but to strengthen the system as a whole.
Making the skies safer for the future.
It's a continuous evolution. Aviation safety is never static. It's an ongoing process of adaptation and learning, even if the path there is paved with immense sorrow.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into some of the most significant air incidents of late 2024 and early 2025, we've seen the profound human impact, like with Air India Flight AI 171, the technical systemic questions from the Potomac River collision, the diverse challenges aviation faces globally, from cities to remote wilderness, each one unique, but each offering critical insights.
Yeah, that interplay between technology, environment, human factors.
Our goal was really to give you a clear, structured understanding of these complex events. Identify those critical takeaways, link them to how aviation safety keeps evolving.
We hope these insights provide a more nuanced perspective,
Yeah.
on a topic that often just hits the headlines in crisis moments. See the intricate web of factors involved in keeping air travel safe.
And the dedication of those working to learn from every incident.
Absolutely.
So what does this all mean for you to ponder? Maybe consider this. Given that relentless pursuit of understanding, that continuous learning from every incident, big or small, civil or military, how does that collective knowledge gained from tragedy shape everything? Not just aircraft design and maintenance, but air traffic control protocols, pilot training methods, emergency response systems, even psychological support for aviation personnel.
Yeah.
How does it all lead, maybe sometimes in unforeseen ways, to advancements in safety for all of us?
How do these moments of profound sorrow ultimately forge a stronger, more resilient system?
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed,